Hello, today I'm in the beautiful 17th century Chartreuse at Chateau Bellevue, which is a Saint-Émilion Grand Cru Classe, so we're about 2 kilometres to the west of Saint-Émilion, and as I look out from the chateau you can actually just see the town of Saint-Émilion in the distance. The wine I'm looking at today is one of 3 wines I'm tasting from the chateau. This is their 2016. And Chateau Bellevue is a Saint-Émilion Grand Cru Classe. It's a tiny estate. In 2016, I think they had 5.9 hectares of vines. We've currently got 3 hectares of vines since the property was divided in 2022. The vineyard is entirely planted to Merlot, and quite particularly, this is Merlot on a limestone soil, one of the particular terroirs that you get within Saint-Émilion. And the limestone helps to give a sort of an elegance and a freshness to the Merlot that is a particular characteristic of Chateau Bellevue. The vineyards here are on a gentle slope facing to the southwest, and they have a fantastic resource in terms of the old vines they have here. There's an average age of 40 years throughout the vineyard, and some of the oldest vines were planted just over 120 years ago at the beginning of the 20th century. The estate here has been in the hands of one family since 1642, when Jean Lacaze purchased the property. The Lacaze family name ceased to be involved in its ownership in 1938. However, it was passed to some other branches of the family with joint ownership between the current owners, the Pradel de Lavaux family, and the Connicks. Now, the Connicks were part owners of the estate right through until 2007, when they sold their portion to the neighbour here, Hubert de Bouard at Chateau Angelus, who was involved in running and did a lot of work revitalising both the chateau, the vineyards, and the cellars here through until 2022, when the estate was divided, with 3 hectares of vineyard going to the neighbour Angelus, the remaining 3 hectares staying with the chateau in the possession of the Pradel de Lavaux family. Now, work on improving the quality of the estate's wines had actually started in 2000 with the engagement of 2 consultants, Nicolas Thienpont from Pomerol and Stephane Derenoncourt, famous for his work in a number of high-profile chateaux in Saint-Émilion. Obviously, once Hubert de Bouard joined the ownership here, he took over supervision of the winemaking, but that reverted to the Derenoncourt Consultancy in 2022 when de Bouard left the partnership. But I think it is indicative of the quality of the terroir here at Chateau Bellevue that the vineyards that the de Bouard family gained from the separation of their portion of the estate were added to those of Chateau Angelus. Now, as I say, a major factor influencing the style of the wine here is its limestone soils, and that limestone acts as a reservoir for water. So in hot vintages, such as 2016, which became warm in June and stayed warm and relatively dry and arid right the way through until harvest, is that the plant always has a reservoir of water that it can draw on. Limestone only lets that water out quite slowly, so it doesn't give too much vigour to the plant, but it does allow growth to be sustained through hot, dry years. And the result is to give a lovely, fresh style, which I hope is going to be readily apparent in this wine. Given the hot, sunny conditions of the 2016 vintage, you should have some lovely, ripe, well-developed tannins and good concentration of fruit. As far as winemaking is concerned here, the focus of that winemaking is trying to preserve that lovely, fresh, red fruit into the final wine. During the period where Hubert de Bouard was working here, I know there was a certain amount of work done in terms of fermentation in open-top barrels, which is something possible to do because this is a relatively small estate, so you're not dealing with massive volumes of wine. The fermentation generally goes on here in a combination of oak fermenters, stainless steel fermenters, and concrete tanks. Importantly, the wine will undergo its malolactic conversion in French oak barrels, which helps to marry the oak notes very closely with the fruit. And the wine then ages for somewhere in the region of 16 to 18 months. At that stage, entirely in French oak barriques. These days, they're pulling back on that a little, and up to 10% of the wine will age in amphorae. So let's take a look at the wine, shall we? We've got a good depth of ruby red colour there. It's not losing a lot of colour to the rim. It's still more sort of reddish. It's not got a sort of a brick red there. And the wine is virtually opaque. This is labelled as having 14.5% alcohol, and it's quite readily creating tears on the side of the glass there. So let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? The aromas are a rich, dark fruit, but actually almost have a slightly minty menthol top note. Not really leafiness, but really quite distinctly minty. Very attractive and a very fresh aspect. So it's for taste. My first impression is freshness and elegance. There are some fine, slightly grainy tannins. Behind that, there's a rich licoriceiness. But yes, I think for me, this vintage really does emphasize the effect of those limestone soils on the wine. There's a sort of rich core of dark plum fruit, but rather than closing in on itself, there's a liveliness that's picking some rich, lively red plum notes out of that darker core, giving it length and freshness to carry on to the finish. The wine is medium to full-bodied. It has quite a nice concentration of those grainy tannins that I was talking about. But yes, you can tell there's a richness and almost licoricey notes to the core that without the wine's underlying freshness would actually seem quite closed in on itself. This is a wine that, compared with the sort of the bigger, richer, more alcoholic 2015 that I'm also trying, really does lift itself above that and shows vibrancy and vitality. The wine has a lovely length and there's a good harmony of its elements. Given its freshness and given its understated concentration, I think this is a wine that is really only just starting to drink at 10 years of age and would very happily sit in your cellar for another 10 to 15 years if you wanted to. But actually, it's delicious now. Those red fruits, that's saying originally red plum, now softer red fruit. There's almost hints of raspberry and strawberry, just delicate hints dancing on the end of my tongue there. Looking at the Wine Searcher aggregated critic score, this was scoring 92 out of 100. And I do wonder whether, given its vibrancy and its energy, whether I wouldn't actually myself currently score this 93 out of 100. I'm really impressed by the wine. It's enjoyable, but it's also a really good expression of the typicity of the wines that are made on the soils here at Chateau Bellevue. So thank you so much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, it would be great if you could press the like button for me. If you have any comments or questions, please pop those in the comments box below. And if you're watching and enjoying these videos, do please consider signing up and subscribing to my YouTube channel. That would really help me to build the channel if I can grow followers. To that end also, if you have friends who you think might like to watch the video, do please feel free to pass it on to them. That would be superb. I'll of course leave a link to the Wine Searcher webpage for this vintage of this wine in the notes below, and I do hope that maybe you'll find that information useful. There's plenty of information on that page. So thank you again for taking the time to watch the video, and I do hope that maybe you'll manage to make some time and come and join me for another video sometime in the near future. Till then, bye for now.